of the air, and I was in and out of that red flag zone so much, and it was just very stressful on the system to kind of have the power out and back on and out and back on, and just wonder if I'm going to be evacuated. So I came out to the
I was in and out of
desert,
that red.
and I'm here now, and so just got here last night, so kind of settling in and figuring things out here in the Airbnb. So it's going to be an interesting evening. I'm so glad you're all here. And I just want to take a moment just to, anybody that's in LA, anybody that's hurting for people in LA, to just take a moment, and I want to send love out, send prayers or whatever, loving kindness or whatever else you believe in sending out. I know so many people who've lost everything. I'm grateful that at this point my home is there, but my heart is really broken for all my loved ones who that's not the case, as well as all the animals and all the plants and the people that didn't make it out. So just sending my love, my prayers, and I'm so grateful that I could be here with all of you tonight. I couldn't really think of something better than being with a bunch of amazing humans like you. So thank you. All right. So, Dedeker, do you want to say anything before we dive in?
I could say some things just to maybe preface, lay the groundwork for you diving into the reading. I wanted to share with folks that I've been friends with Jessica for a very long time. I think 2011, maybe 2012 was when we first met. And as I was reading this book, I was reflecting on how most of my memories of my friendship with Jessica are dominated by memories of conversations about topics that I don't normally speak with my friends about. It's a lot of memories of us sitting and having conversations about pain, abuse, addiction, trauma, sexuality, religion, death, or even just a lot of memories of sitting in silent meditation together. And reading this book, it felt to me like my friendship has felt with you. It feels very intimate and very precious and very real. I didn't feel a sense of like, oh, a disconnect of this author version of my friend versus the real human being. And so, yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that this book feels like a very, very precious part of your heart and your being.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I deeply appreciate that. And I deeply appreciate our friendship and just having the experience of getting to both of us evolve over these years and watch each other do that. So I have a question. Jess, are me and Dedeker both pinned, or can we only pin one person at a time?
Yes, you are currently both pinned.
Oh, cool. Okay. Because I can't tell. Awesome. Thank you. I shouldn't have even asked. Jess is like, I don't even know. Jess is a saint in my life. Thank you, Jess. Okay. So I guess we'll begin. I don't actually even have the book yet. I only have the advanced reader copy. So that's what I'll be reading out of. So I might even run into a typo or something. And I chose a couple essays to read some pieces from. I hopefully the title of the book and anything you might have looked into about the book let you know, like, hey, content warning. There's a lot of intense stuff in here. I didn't choose like the most intense parts because, I don't think that's necessary. But we are exploring some challenging themes and topics. So I just wanted to put that out there before we started. All right. So This is a book of essays and poems. And I want to thank my publishers, North Atlantic Books, a few of whom are here tonight, because, you know, the first book, Good Sex, for anyone that read it, it was very personal, but it was, you know, in the self-help genre. And this is really different because these are primarily my stories. It's not self-help. And it's a lot more creative. Honestly, it was a lot more fun, a lot more satisfying, a lot more challenging emotionally to write. But if it wasn't for North Atlantic Books, you know, I wouldn't have. This wouldn't exist, right? They championed me to write this book instead of another self-help book, and so I just want to say thank you so much to my publisher for giving me that opportunity. So the first essay that I'll be reading from is called A Mother's Love. And I'm just going to read 2 sections from it. And then Dedeker and I'll chat just a bit. I am 38 years old. There's beige carpet under my knees. I hate this carpet. I truly despise it. I avoid taking in my experience of this well-worn wall-to-wall monstrosity daily, lest it remind me of how my life is lacking in beauty and instead rich with full-body pain. I'm in my office and more recently my bedroom due to romantic unrest at an altar of sea glass, wishbones, pictures of me as a child, white sage before I stopped buying it, random coins, trinkets, and pictures of Buddha, the Tridevi, and Jesus. I have been humbled, wrecked to be more precise, by chronic pain, illness, a nervous system shot from a lifetime of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, heart-racing anxiety, menacing nightmares, unrelenting suicidal ideation, a classic dark night of the soul, and the crumbling of a long-term relationship that was littered with gaslighting, love bombing, punishment, and the emotional paper cuts of a dozen tiny lies. To say I am at rock bottom is to under-exaggerate. I may not believe the thoughts that tell me to off myself, but I've still had to fight them daily for the last year. Atop the dreaded carpet, I have, as suggested by Jacqueline Woods, a trauma therapist and amazing shaman and healer, taken one small puff of cannabis. While I am over 15 years sober from alcohol, I've become California sober because of the chronic pain, frequent nausea, loss of appetite, and general unwell being. I don't get high, except every so often by accident. This small dose does not get me high. Rather, it relaxes my body, soothes my pain, and opens the aperture of my creative mind and spiritual connection just a bit. I settle in to meditate using a Divine Mother practice that Jacqueline taught me. I am working to understand and resolve the aspects of poor health that are related to my adverse childhood through what I would have once found to be laughably woo-woo. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and bottoming out can expand and alter one's mind in surprising ways. I connect to the presence of Divine Mother, though I've been invited to use whatever divine energy I feel aligned with, divine genderless power, for example. I feel her above me, around me. The nurturing and regenerative fullness of the connection I've cultivated is immediately available. I sip, as Jacqueline would say, the energy into the top of my head. Divine Mother, please open, clear, and activate my crown chakra. I see and feel a beautiful lotus flower in the style of Alex Gray mixed with Georgia O'Keeffe blossoming from the top of my head. I sip the energy between and above my eyebrows. I stay connected to the source above me. Divine Mother, please open, clear, and activate my third eye chakra. The lotus blooms, connecting my eyebrows with radiance in the manner of Frida Kahlo. And then I continue to my throat. Divine Mother, please open, clear, and activate my throat chakra. When I arrive at my heart, there is a block, and the flow of energy cannot pass through. I feel a deep and sorrowful ache. I pause here and call on my many years of Vipassana practice. I get curious about the emotional sensations present here. Equanimity is easily won. Spiritual awakening, it seems to me, eventually becomes about remembering and defining. I have remembered and refined the connection to equanimity for a good number of years. It is available to me in the darkest of times. It's not some special magical thing that was bestowed upon me as the result of being spiritual. It's just repetition, much like learning to play piano or tennis. Now I shift into an inquiry practice of sorts, not in the style of Ramana Maharshi, but by asking the feelings what they are connected to from my past. A psychological inquiry, using the content as information instead of sitting as an infinite and loving awareness or deconstructing the phenomena. I want to take it personally, to solidify the selves that are needing to be seen and loved. I need to get into the shadowy, ugly, and ashamed places of my psyche. No mud, no lotus. With no warning, I am suddenly faced with the repressed fact that I love going to urgent care. I love being wheeled into the hospital and rushed to a room by concerned nurses. I love being connected to IVs and heart monitors. I love having emergency CAT scans and endoscopies. I love when the anesthesiologist explains the process to me and then has me count down into soft darkness. I love when I get to stay the night. I love it more when I get to stay the week. I love eating the terrible food, being helped to the bathroom, and going in and out of consciousness as doctors and specialists stand over me with charts on clipboards. I love pushing the call button. I already know, but have never fully admitted all this to myself or anyone else. It seemed so shameful, so privileged, so counter to my claims of desiring wellness, or rather my complaints of being sick. I couldn't speak my desire for health out loud. I couldn't bear the disappointment of wanting. I learned that wanting was dangerous, made you a likely target for devastating blows to the heart and sometimes to the face. I would not want what I wanted. I could spiritually bypass wanting like a champ. So while this revelation is new, I have never surrendered to exploration of the territory. Today, I am ripe for submission, swiftly topped by the truth I have been foolishly attempting to dominate like a brat. And I'm going to read one more section, a short section from this essay, and then Dedeker and I will chat a bit. So I tell a story of being in the hospital at 6 years old. And this is a little bit about what that cultivated inside of me. The other perk the hospital offered to me at 6 was a clean and safe environment with consistent routine. Here, I could relax, knowing that all my needs would be met. My hypervigilance could fall away. I didn't need to be on guard for my mother's level of emotional distress or track how drunk my dad was. There was no screaming or throwing beer cans. No one was gaslighting or love bombing me, or perhaps worse than either of those at that age. No one went hours or even days acting like I didn't exist. The adults were too lost in their suffering to really see me. I was treated like a child. I wasn't treated. I don't know what that says. I was treated like a child, not a punching bag. I think it's supposed to say I was treated like a punching bag or a confidant, not a child. The sparkling floors regularly changed sheets. Oh, in the hospital. Okay, sorry. In the hospital, I was treated like a child, not a punching bag or a confidant. The sparkling floors regularly changed sheets, fresh gowns, sterile bathroom were a far cry from our constantly cluttered and dirty house. Meals and bedtimes were set and kept by the hospital staff. My parents couldn't even do that for themselves. What does a child need to thrive? It seems to me that the consistent care I received from the hospital and the love that was unconditionally offered by my mother during those hospital stays were all I really needed. Consistency and love, the best recipe for a good childhood and a healthy entrance into adulthood, if you ask me. This is not to say any parent does this perfectly, or that I got none of that from my parents. I just didn't get enough, not by a long shot. By the time they put a plastic bracelet around my tiny pale wrist and delivered me into my ice bed. I was starving for the nutrients of love and consistency. Thus, a belief formed. To get love and care, I must be gravely ill. All right.
I wanted to start with, in other areas in the book, you share how, being a person with chronic illness or dealing with chronic pain, many people can feel united in having the experience of people offering unsolicited advice to you about how to fix your pain or how to fix your illness, or people can make this suggestion, oh, maybe on some subconscious level you want to be sick, right? You're just wanting to be sick. Have you ever thought about that? And how the experience of people saying that to you can be so frustrating, painful, agonizing, dismissive. And yet you uncover this about yourself, right? That there is this neural pathway, sort of this difference that rather than it being about wanting to be sick, uncovering that there is some sort of function that's being served by being sick. And so I suppose where I want to start with this is wondering, were you nervous to write this chapter in the book and to put this in the book?
Yeah, definitely. And, the beginning of the essay starts with like how screwed up it is when, when people say that. Like that's kind of how the essay begins, or how screwed up it can be.
No, if you're Bronx Mahone, like my dad's Patrick Mahone.
If you're here, please mute yourself unless you're me or Dedeker. Thank you. So yes, and I know when I first, like one of the first rounds of edits, or maybe a call with North Atlantic, we talked about how that essay could potentially be one of the essays that got me some backlash online. I hope that I am thorough enough without shying away from my own experience in the essay that people understand that I'm not talking about toxic positivity or, just think your way into health or whatever, or blame yourself if you're not well. But certainly for me, this understanding ultimately led to being able to talk to that part of myself, so that whenever I had that urge arise, that actual craving to be in the hospital, I could say, you are cared for, loved, and safe when you're healthy. And I just did that over and over again. And I really pretty much never have those thoughts anymore. And I did see a big improvement in my health. Now, there were a lot of other things that I was doing as well, but I do think that giving that young part of me that message again and again definitely played a part in some improvement in my health.
Have you been able to share your experience with other people like close to you that also experience chronic pain or chronic illness? Or is this the first time it's seeing the light of day?
It's the second time because I taught like a workshop, or it was like a one night workshop at Esalen where I told this story. It was like a self-love workshop, and I told this story. And I think that was the first time I shared it publicly. Other than that, maybe with a few people here and there, but yeah, not to this degree.
Yeah. And also, I do feel like in the rest of that chapter, you do make it very clear that while you experienced certain improvements in your health, that it wasn't like this one particular meditation was the key that like solved everything for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with any chronic condition, with chronic illness, with chronic pain, with complex PTSD, there anyone that tells you, oh, there's this one thing that's going to fix you and you're going to be fixed and you're going to be better, it's like, run, because they're selling you something. I am all for complete remission and wellness and all of that, if that's what's in the cards. For me, so far, that hasn't been in the cards. And I'm okay with that. Because, you know, acceptance helps. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And also to clarify, like the question I was going to ask was, I imagine that to even undertake an exercise like this, right? This kind of deep inquiry exercise like this, when you've already been living in the face of many people dismissing or implying that it's just this one thing, or you just need to think your way to health, or whatever, that like it takes a lot to even bring yourself there to be able to do the inquiry. But it also sounds like the context that this was in was that this meditation that you did, it was not presented to you and like this is what you're going to explore specifically, right?
Yeah. It was definitely, it was open. Like we were talking. I mean, I was in the midst of like a very challenging period of my life when I was seeing this therapist slash shaman. And we talked a lot about my pain and illness, and but among other things. And so this was she taught me this, and I did it a lot. Like I did a lot of this Divine Mother practice. I actually have a version of it up on my YouTube. If anyone wants to try it out, it's on there. But yeah, it was in combination with with a lot of things. With a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to, before moving on, there's another theme that you brought up in the book, especially speaking about your meditation work. And I think that especially when people explore more meditation or Buddhist thought or things like that, there is this kind of idea that there's a certain amount of suffering that can be optional, right? And maybe even some people might go so far as to claim it's like all suffering is optional. And I feel like in many parts in the book, you seem to land on that, of the ways that your own meditation practice has opened up this idea that suffering is optional. And yet also, like, how do we find ways to rectify that with the reality of chronic illness, chronic pain, trauma that's always going to be a part of your fabric, even if you've done so much work to heal it and have a relatively functional life. So I guess I'm wondering if you could speak to kind of rectifying those two things.
Totally. And yeah, and let's not forget late stage capitalism, and let's not forget genocide, and let's not forget the Los Angeles on fire, right? Like the world's just doing what it's doing, right? And there's suffering all around us in so many ways, and the polarization and it's such an intense time. You don't need to look far to be inspired to suffer. Suffering is optional. And what I will say is I agree with what I heard Adyashanti once say, which is that almost all of suffering is optional. And that there is a kind of animal pain that is not, a kind of animal suffering that is not. And for anyone that doesn't know, Adyashanti is a fantastic, amazing spiritual teacher who deals with intense health, chronic pain, and can't take narcotics because they don't work for him. And so he knows about pain, and he actually doesn't even teach anymore, partially because of that. And I agree, because I've gotten to a place where if I want, I can quantize pretty much anything that comes up, except when I'm in the kind of pain where you're in and out of consciousness, because you get very confused, and it just goes beyond, it just goes into some other realm, and that's physical pain. And Shinzen he actually did say to me once, he's like, if you master this technique, you could literally be torn limb from limb into tiny pieces and never suffer at all. So maybe, not my experience, but perhaps that is possible. I hope I don't have to find that out. But I will say that in my personal experience, a great majority of suffering is optional. Does not mean it feels good, though. Yeah.
I remember I remember being in meditation class with you and hearing about that specifically, that you could be torn limb from limb and with this particular technique. And yeah, I've always had a question mark about that one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, let's see. Where are we? Okay. I might change up our order here a little bit, Dedeker. I might
Sure,
skip the addiction, the disease of
sure.
post-trauma, just because I want to make sure I get it in. Let me see. 59. Okay. All right. So this is from an essay called Addiction, the Disease of Post-Trauma. And a mentor of mine, an old mentor of mine, Tracy McMillan, one time I was chatting with her, and it was right after I had gotten all these health diagnoses, and we were talking about labels, things like fibromyalgia or, you know, Lyme or alcoholism, right? And she was saying, I think so many things are actually just the disease of post-trauma. And I never forgot that. And so that's what this essay is inspired by. The name of this essay is inspired by. And this essay is just, it's about my experience with addiction, and getting sober and all of that. And this little chunk is about the ACE survey. And I'm going to read it real quick. There's a plethora of studies on how bad a bad childhood is for humans. The toxic stress of an adverse childhood can negatively impact your physical and mental health, leading to lifelong chronic conditions. It's been shown that ACEs can interfere with brain development and affect the way your nervous system responds to adversity and stress. Around 61% of adults in the US have at least one ACE, and approximately 16% have at least 4. People with ACEs are more likely to be smokers and to keep smoking even when there are health consequences. ACEs increase the risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and that's not just for smokers. The risk of, I can't pronounce it. I guess I did when I did the audiobook, but dyslipidemia, something like that. Chronic lung disease, asthma, liver disease, digestive disease, kidney disease, arthritis, and additional chronic diseases shoots up for those with at least 4 ACEs. The possibility of suicide is 30 times more likely if you have 4 or more ACEs. With an ACE score of 6 or more, your lifespan could be shortened by 20 years. LGBTQ plus kids, girls, and racial ethnic minorities may have an increased risk of having 4 or more ACEs. Studies have suggested that ACEs can lead to fibromyalgia, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, depression, anxiety, poverty, and the list goes on. In short, having a fucked up childhood is not good for your health and well-being. My ACE score is 7. No matter your ACE score, here's some good news. Adverse childhood experiences are not set in stone. Your ACE survey doesn't account for positive childhood experiences, PCEs, that might decrease the negative effects. Just one trusted adult can increase resilience and lower the impact of adverse experiences. Greater family connection can lead to greater flourishing in adulthood, and even when there are ACEs involved. Psychotherapy in childhood has been shown to reduce psychopathological symptoms. Your fate is not sealed by what happened to you. Even glimmers of goodness can change your trajectory. And actually, before I stop, because I think both of these people are here, I want to quickly read these parts if I can find them. Okay, here we go. Ellen, if you're still here. One teacher, this is talking about the glimmers, my positive childhood experiences. One special teacher once told me that if they had a kid, they wish they would be just like me. They made me feel like I was deserving of that kind of love. They taught me to treat others with kindness. Being bullied at home, I was a bit of a bully for a short period. They cast me in my first leading role in a play. And when I was terrified and said no, they lovingly convinced me. I've been an actor ever since. They encouraged my writing and stuck up for me when another teacher was treating me badly. So Ellen, if you're still here, thank you. There's some a bunch of stuff about my parents and other people in my life who just offered really positive childhood experiences. But the other piece I wanted to read was my aunt Kashi, who's here, my aunt told hilarious stories and made me laugh so hard it hurt, and I had to beg her to stop. She was a dancer and took me to see modern dance in the city and then to fancy dinners afterward. She and my uncle both listened to me and made life seem magical. So since y'all are here, I wanted to read those.
Yeah, so I mean, the research on ACEs is fantastic, and I dropped into the chat just in case people didn't know that it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And yeah, Jess, can you give just like a couple of examples of like what's on that survey?
Yeah, it's things like have you had a parent in prison? What did you have an either physically or like emotionally absent parent? Were you physically abused? Were you sexually abused? Did you see another family member? I think I don't know if they say mother, but have you seen a family member or parent experiencing domestic abuse? Medical trauma might be on there, but yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, like what put you down this particular rabbit trail of finding this information? Was it part of just the general, like, all the research rabbit trails around trying to understand your own like illness and symptoms?
Actually, a woman, Christine Roselle, she's a coach and a writer. She's an old friend of mine. I called her. Honestly, I think it's right before North Atlantic picked up Good Sex, and I was going through a challenging time in a lot of ways, and I had just gotten out of the hospital. I'd been in the hospital for like a week, and I called this friend. I'm not sure why. I think I was asking her advice about this book. I was in a sort of book
I gotta get.
before North Atlantic picked it up. And she said, listen, she kind of didn't want to talk about the things I was saying. And it was almost like, yeah, okay, that's cool, but you need to read this book. And she told me to read Childhood Disrupted. Blanking on the author's name right now. We're friends on TikTok, but I can't think of her name in this moment, but Childhood Disrupted. And it goes into, that's how I was introduced to the ACE survey, that book. And it was really the beginning of me actually understanding that there is science around how adverse childhood experiences impact you and how they impacted me. And so this essay is about addiction, and there's a lot of science around that, like how these lead to addiction later in life. And so, or early in life, I was like a teenage alcoholic. And yeah, it was really life-changing. And the wild thing is that the book talks about a study. I don't know if I put the study in my book or not, but about rats. And there's 3 sets of rats. One set, poor rats, I hate it, but one set of rats is in a cage where it's just normal. Like they get their food, they get their water, everything's just normal. It just stays the same. The next cage, everything's normal except they get shocked once a day at the same time every day. And then the third is, who the hell knows what's going to happen? They might get shocked, they might not. They might get shocked 5 times. They might get no food, they might get extra food. Their whole cage might be emptied, their whole cage might be rearranged. Like anything could happen. Chronic unpredictable stress. So the rats that ended up with bleeding ulcers, the ones in the third cage, the chronic unpredictable stress. And a bleeding stomach is exactly why I'd been in the hospital. So that was very illuminating and impactful for me. Yeah, someone put
Yeah.
the thank you.
And I guess it feels like it unlocks so much having that understanding. And I'm wondering about not just for you, but like with the clients that you work with in navigating trauma, like, how do you help people navigate this information about themselves, maybe about their childhoods, without it feeling like it's deterministic about their future?
Yeah. I mean, I almost never talk about the ACE survey with my clients, to be honest. It's I talk about it, but I don't tell people to go take the test. If they're seeing me, they've already got a bunch of ACEs. They know that they do. That's why they're there to see me. So I think unless I think it's going to be incredibly helpful for someone, I more likely am telling friends or saying it in a podcast or something like that. Mainly because I think very much because of what you're saying. Like, it can feel very disheartening. But I do talk about post-traumatic growth. I mean, that's part of what I do with folks and those positive childhood experiences. And so oftentimes, especially with someone who's coming in with complex PTSD, with severe childhood trauma, we're starting with, okay, how do we feel safe? How do we feel good? How do we realign to pleasure or something pleasure adjacent? Because even that word can be like really an intense word. How do we start to, as in somatic experiencing, how do we create so much resource, such a wide base of support, that we can bring in just a little bit of this intensity and not be overwhelmed, because that is the issue with it is the issue with a lot of therapy when we're talking about complex PTSD. It can't, you have to be able to get into the nervous system, and it has to be so safe, and there has to be so much choice, and there has to be so much consent. And it's just like, trauma informed is not the same thing as specialized in trauma. And so I don't know how I got on that kick, but yeah, that's what.
No, it's relevant to what I wanted to bring up next, is that in this same chapter, as you're talking about the ACEs, and in so much of your book, you're also very literally laying out what your ACEs were, right? Like, you share all these very, raw graphic stories of your childhood, of, the chronic unpredictable stress that you grew up with. And then at the same time, you share about these trusted adults sprinkled throughout your childhood, right? Your aunt and the next door neighbor and the teacher and the men at the restaurant that you used to work with. Like, and it does remind me of Peter Levine, who is the psychotherapist who created somatic experiencing. He says that working with clients and kind of finding those sources from their childhood, right? It's like they have to be there, like, because basically, if you didn't have that, like, you would be a monster. And now that's a very dramatic way of putting it. I don't want to, I don't want to call anybody a monster, but like, um, I think it does offer a certain sense of hopefulness, right? That even in your childhood, with all this chronic stress and the unpredictability of even, the handful of times the neighbor brought me in and gave me apple juice, obviously, as far as, we can't expect that that completely heals a lifetime of childhood trauma, but it is like something, right? It's a resource, it's a stepping stone in your development.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can absolutely point out the moments or periods of my life that have allowed me to be alive right now. Like going to the school in Rose Valley, for half of fourth grade, fifth and sixth grade. It was just like beautiful. It's still, my sister actually teaches there now. My mom went there actually, and my aunt, I think, as well. But it's just this amazing place. And I was, my stepfather was able to send me there. And I think going to that school, if I hadn't gone to that school, I really don't know what would have happened to me, honestly. And that's just like one of the examples. And then there's just those little moments, those tiny, tiny moments. It could even be a stranger in some of the cases where it's just like something was said or I was seen, which, it's huge when you don't feel
Yeah,
seen,
yeah.
even by a stranger. So yeah. And I encourage all of us, whether we have a bunch of ACEs or not, to lean into those things. And especially now that with everything that we're navigating as humans on this planet. It's like finding, it's not just like write a gratitude list. It's like, yeah, feel it, get actually like pull it up out of the Rolodex of your memory and just like let yourself feel into it. Really important.
Yeah. One more piece I wanted to touch on, because there has been now, there's now like a growing body of research around trauma and the body in particular, right? You know, we've learned over the course of many decades that it is not just a cognitive thing, right? That our trauma lives somewhere in our nervous system, in our body experience. And I think that's made a lot of sense for a lot of people. And there has been an explosion of somatic therapies, various somatic therapies that have developed. There's just a lot more discourse, particularly online, talking about these things. And I guess I'm wondering, as you see this happen and watch this discourse play out, like, are there things that you think are still missing from the current conversation around trauma and the body, or things that you think people still misconstrue or mistake about trauma and the body?
I probably could say a lot, but I'm going to say one thing, which is that we are living inside of very harmful systems. And we are watching the consequence of that right now. And there is not individual healing without collective healing. Now, I sometimes have to just focus on my individual healing. And then I can go and do some of the collective. And then I need to, like, right, it's not about, we got to hold it all though. This idea, this capitalistic productivity, self-improvement idea of, I just need to work on me. It's bullshit. And it doesn't work, not ultimately, because you are still living in poisoned water or air if you're in LA. And I think with anything, the wellness industry or any of this stuff, it can very quickly just be part of capitalism and part of, ultimately harming ourselves in trying to heal. And so I think it's really important that we talk about trauma as not just an individual thing or an individual problem that we need to solve. I mean, like I don't argue with people online or in person really, but I will share my opinion. And if I hear someone talking about the so-called looters in Los Angeles right now, sure, it's happening. Of course it's happening. Like this stuff happens, by the way, not to the degree that the news is saying, for anyone not in Los Angeles. But my first thought is, how many of these looters have way more than 4 aces because of not only their own personal experience, but the experience of living in this world where there's not this culture where there's not enough. There's plenty, but seemingly there's not enough because there's a small percentage of people that, have most of it. So, I just think it's incredibly important that we don't get locked into this self-improvement, productivity, fix myself thing for that reason. I could say a lot more, but that's what I'll say.
Very well said.
Okay, so let's see. We have about 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to do Swamp of Sadness. And then maybe we'll just talk briefly about it, and then I'll close out with that poem. And Jess, I think maybe 6:35. I might need just a little bit of wiggle time. Wiggle room. Let me see, page 25. So I was going to read another one of the favorites, like favorites as in like people that worked on the book, worked on having the book come out, really loved. But instead, I'm gonna read a little chunk from one of my favorites, which are different. Let me see. Okay, This is called, wait, where? This is called Floating in the Swamp of Sadness. Sweet 16. I sat on the linoleum tile floor of the studio apartment I shared with my dad when he was in town, back against the wall, curly Q phone cord twisted in the four fingers of my left hand, talking to the suicide prevention hotline. The man on the other end sounded like he was tall and hunched, with his hair thinning at the temples. I couldn't tell if he was kind or if it was just exhaustion making his voice sound so heavy and slow. It was after midnight, not actually my birthday anymore. How long had he been answering calls like mine that night? I called to say I couldn't try anymore. I didn't care anymore. I was alone and not drunk enough, with a purple bruise blooming in my heart because one of my best friends was with the 22-year-old man who I had been obsessed with for several years. He was a punk rock alcoholic junkie, today clean and sober, and he was not mine. He belonged to all of us castaway kids. We took turns playing the role of his salvation, dodging his sarcasm, kissing his pierced lips and skin covered with hand-drawn tattoos, and drinking his wild Irish rose with ice out of a plastic thermos covered with band stickers. He never did more than fuck me with his mouth and fingers, and he wouldn't let me try heroin, no matter how convincing I was at being a grown-up. I once begged him to fuck me, rubbing up against him as we lay on a twin mattress on his bedroom floor in his parents' house. He refused, saying as much as he wanted to be inside me, he'd shared needles and wouldn't risk my health. Later that night, he asked me to close my eyes while he shot up. Once when he was trying to get clean, he asked me to hide all the spoons in a Denny's booth where we were drinking hours-old coffee and chain-smoking cigarettes. When I turned 16, my father, who'd done heroin a few times as a teen but liked beer more, was in Harrisburg or Pittsburgh or some other burg. He was trying to get his driver's license back after 3 DUIs, 10 days in jail, and over 4 years hiding his bike in the bushes by freeway exits where work buddies would pick him up and drive him to the oil refineries that he worked in. When he was gone, I got the full mattress on the floor to myself, and I spent less time in my room, which was the bathroom, where I kept bottles of liquor and clothing in the linen cabinet and sometimes put a cot in the bathtub. Sometimes I had sex on the shaggy, never laundered bath mat. Once, a few friends and I sliced our thumbs open and became blood brothers, red dripping on black and white tiles. We laughed and laughed, drunk, with layers of toilet paper wrapped around our fresh wounds. When my dad was home, the bathroom gave me a place to sleep without the scent of his rotten teeth and the sadness in his eyes when I refused to cuddle. The night of my 16th birthday, I would have been happy to sleep with him under the polyester sheets and the purple, pink, and tan Afghan handmade by a family member whose name I don't remember. I would have welcomed his bad advice and 2 long hugs. We would have drunk his cans of beer and smoked cigarettes and tried to keep our always loud voices quiet so the neighbor on the other side of the shockingly thin wall wouldn't bang and shout and call the cops. My dad would have given me some cash or a classic rock CD wrapped in newspaper as a present. We wouldn't have had singing or candles, but maybe some tasty cakes and Wawa hoagies set out on ice chests and cardboard boxes. We'd sit on an outdoor folding chair and a single wooden chair that sat tableless in the kitchenette where we never cooked, unless the meal came from a can. I was not happy on my 16th birthday, and I am not happy today. But that's what my mind is telling me, so it's probably not true. It's raining, which adds to the melancholy and supports my mind's opinion on how I'm feeling, but still, I'm not sure I believe it. My sweet animal brain has always been fuzzy and wired for sinking into a swamp of sadness. Even then, when I celebrated my sweet 16, I was trying to smooth it out and rewire the neural pathways that led me again and again to despair, though I didn't fully understand that's what I was doing. I was just trying to feel better when I called the suicide hotline. It was the same thing I did as a 6-year-old when I would call the Storytime hotline from our orange rotary phone, so the recorded voice of an adult could offer me comfort in the form of make-believe tales that were updated every week. On weeks when my home life was particularly bad, I would call repeatedly, listening to the same story again and again. In both the suicide hotline and the storytime hotline, I was looking for a friend to call me out of the murky depths, like Atreyu called to rescue his loyal and loving horse Artex in The Never-Ending Story. You have to try, the friend would say. You have to care.
So I always so appreciate the opportunities to talk to another writer because for me it feels like, oh, thank God, another unhinged person to understand like how it feels to unhinge yourself during the writing process. When I read this chapter, it made me think a lot about the writing of Anne Lamott, who is a writer who she writes a lot about writing in particular. And she wrote something once about how when you're writing, it's like there's all these different parts of you that just like pull up a chair behind you and breathe down your neck, right? So it's like the inner critic, but also these, especially if you're working with autobiographical work, it's like these different past selves who show up. And so I suppose I wanted to ask like what it's like for you to write with your 16-year-old self present, if that's how it shows up for you.
Yeah. It's exhilarating and exciting and makes me feel like I'm going to go get into some trouble. Not good trouble. Um, feels kind of intoxicating. Um, and then it feels kind of afterwards, it feels sort of devastating and emptying, hollowing out. Like I
Mhm.
have to kind of recover.
Mm.
Um, it was most challenging to record the audiobook.
Mm.
That was, I mean, I feel like those younger selves were just like right there. And then there was me today, like, oh my God, sweetheart, I am so sorry. Like, it was like I was pausing after like every chunk after every essay to just like cry for a little bit.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's a mixed experience. How those younger selves show up. But while it's happening, I think because I started writing as soon as I could, like I didn't go to a lot of school in my life. Um, I really wanted to read and write though, and I got a tutor and I started journaling at age 6. Actually, all of my journals for my whole life are in the back of my car right now because that was one of the things I
Wow.
felt I couldn't live without if my house burned down. So yeah, I started at 6 and I wrote from all of those perspectives. I started writing in code a bit at a certain point because I realized now it was too painful to actually write like today this happened. So it would be like some sort of coded poetic sort of thing that didn't real. And then every so often there'd be something that was straightforward. Like my dad loves drinking more than he loves me, so I'm going to drink too. I'm going to drink as much as I can so that he wants to be with me or something like this, right? And out of all this sort of like web of like you can't quite understand what I'm talking about, and then it'll just be like bam. So I think because I wrote and wrote and wrote all the way through all of those years, all the way into my late 20s in these journals, I think those parts of me are like very available and happy to be accessed, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and also amazing that it's like you have literally like the arcane materials of your journals to summon up that younger self. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I almost left them at home. I was like, do I really need them? I don't think my house is going to burn down. I think I'm going to be okay, but it was like worst case scenario, I have to get this back out of the car and put it back in the closet, you know what I mean?
Right.
But
Yeah.
that, whatever. Best case, I don't use them forever.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know we want to do some Q&A, so maybe I'll just read this last piece. And do you have anything you want to say?
No, I could ask 600 more questions, but I think you should get to this last piece. I want to make sure that that gets in there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the wonderful questions and dialogue. So this is short. This is actually it's when you don't think you can survive it, right? That's what we decided.
Yes.
This actually opens the book. This is the first piece in the book. And I think it applies to a lot of things right now, perhaps. When you don't think you can survive it. When you don't think you can survive it, start where you are. This is my foot on the floor. This is my other foot tucked under my leg on the couch. This is the sound of the heater. This is the smell of unwashed dishes in the sink. This is the feeling of both feet on the floor. This is the feeling of standing up. This is the feeling of walking across the room. This is the sound of socked feet on hardwood. This is what the kitchen looks like. This is what the sink of dishes looks like. I'm turning on the water. I'm rinsing the crumbs and honey from this plate. I'm opening the dishwasher. I'm placing the plate in the dishwasher. I'm rinsing the ring of coffee from this chipped white mug. I'm fitting this mug into the top rack. I'm feeling the warm water on my hands. I'm smelling the citrus of the dish soap. So I must be breathing. I must be moving. I must be alive. I must be surviving. You won't always be solely surviving, I promise you. There are days of unfiltered joy yet to come. There are moments when you'll say aloud in awe and wonder, I had no idea. I didn't realize. Thank you. Thank you. There are new loves and old friends and babies to hold and your next favorite film to watch and meals that reveal once unknown layers of pleasure and quiet afternoons when there is nothing you have to do except what you want to do and songs you play hundreds of times a month and a new touch from known hands that robs you of your breath and teaches you to breathe again. And one day, your feet on the floor, you'll walk to the kitchen. You'll turn on the water, rinse crumbs and honey from a plate, and you'll know you survived for this simple human moment, this miracle of being, this starting that is always starting again. Thanks for talking with me, Dedeker.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for letting me call you more than a few times when I felt like I couldn't survive it.
Goodness. Right back at you. Right back at you. Yeah. Okay, so Jess, do I turn it over to you now?
Yes, thank you. That was wonderful, beautiful. Everyone, we're going to move into our Q&A segment. So if you have a question, you can put it into the chat and I can read it aloud, or you can just use the raise hand function or just unmute yourself. I'm going to allow that now. And to ask Jess any questions. I think everyone's sitting with all of these wonderful passages. I'm going to put in the chat again the pre-order link. Okay, so Amanda has a question here. Oh, no. Oh, yes, Amanda. When did you know there was a connection between somatic work and chronic pain?
Um, before learning about the ACE survey, before really acknowledging or recognizing that I had chronic pain or that I was chronically ill, I was in the closet about it for a long time. That's in the book too. I started getting body work done by, I don't even remember. I had to drive a couple hours or an hour and a half or something. And this physical therapist was doing pelvic floor work. And he'd go into this dark little room, and there'd always be another person in there with him, like a woman would be in there with him too, as like a, just for, so everyone felt safe. And he started doing work on the pelvic floor, which in that instance, there was no internal work done, but I had that later with other practitioners. But as he started to work on this, all of these muscles of the pelvic floor, I just remember feeling all this emotion move through, but also all this tension and pain release. And that was hands-on somatic work. As far as like somatic experiencing, this was also before I was like open or even with myself acknowledging that I was chronically ill. I was seeing it was my first somatic experiencing therapist, Leanne Teeny. And I remember her telling me like that this somatic experiencing work would help with my pain. And I didn't get it because it was so gentle. Somatic experiencing is so gentle, as it should be. And I thought I needed someone to like, just like drill the pain out of me. And I found like, no, actually this slow process of like allowing the body to complete these incomplete emergency responses was actually the way for that pain to start to soften and to learn to work with it in a new way. I was very rough with myself up until then.
Wonderful, thank you. Greg has asked, what does gaslighting mean to you?
I saw your phone. I looked at your text messages. I know you cheated on me. No, I didn't. What are you talking about? That's not what you read. See, there's nothing on my phone. Yes, I did. I saw it. You must have erased it. No, I did not erase it. You're being crazy right now. You're being insane. Right? Why are you acting? Why are you so jealous right now? Why do you act this way? I know you cheated on me. I saw the message. You're insane. You're crazy. That's one example that I've experienced. But gaslighting can, I mean, we're all gaslit by the myth of the American dream. I mean, we're all gaslit all the time in this country and elsewhere. But in my personal experience of relational gaslighting, it is I mean, I'm in recovery from it. I'm 3.5 years out of a narcissistically abusive relationship, and I'm still working on it, because it basically takes your reality and says it's not real. And this can happen in really overt ways, but it can also happen in many, many, many covert, subtle ways, which is more of what my experience was, which is it gets in, it's like fiberglass, and again, in my experience, it's I'm seeing reality and I'm being told that that's not real. And this isn't like a difference of opinion kind of thing. This is literally like, I'm wearing a black shirt. No, you're not. Your shirt's white. No, it's black. Your eyes got worse after COVID. I think maybe you can't quite tell that it's white. Like, I think you should go to the doctor. Well, maybe it's your trauma, actually. Your trauma could be causing your eyesight to just sort of get messed up, because that's a white shirt, right? Something like this. And it can be that like ridiculous. Sometimes it's so ridiculous that it's like, why would you even? And once you really see it and you understand what's happening, the spell's broken. Once you really see it. Can take a long time though. I hope that answered that question.
Thank you. Tamara has said, so inspired by your story of healing, Jess. I'd love to know what resource or practice or paradigm shift helped you most to feel into a sense of safety in the world.
I love that question. And I love you. Thanks for being here. Um, well, it certainly wasn't the first couple years of my meditation practice, though those first couple years were very fruitful. They did not create a sense of safety. It was when I started learning about resource. Resource is as simple as find one thing in your body where there's not a problem. Find one place that doesn't hurt. Find one place that feels neutral. Find one place that feels relaxed. Find one place that feels pleasurable and focus on it. And it's not about denying or resisting the challenge or the pain. It's just about leaning away from it and leaning into something that feels okay. And that simple practice just with the body. Now, resource can go way broader than that, and it's kind of limitless. But just that was huge for me, because I started to find that in a body that had been in a lifelong state of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, I started to find there were places where there wasn't activation. And the work, part of the work that, I'm doing with clients is we're working to expand the window of tolerance. So hyper-aroused nervous system, this is fight and flight. And, it's cocaine, and it's workaholism, and it's anxiety, and it's all this, right? And then hypo-aroused nervous system, that's like depression and chronic fatigue and collapse and freeze, etc. Cannabis. I'm not saying anything's wrong with cannabis, or cocaine, I guess. I don't know. I don't do it. But when you overuse these things, you can be more in these states. So what we're doing when we're working to resolve trauma is to create the space that's between the hyper and the hypo, make it bigger, make it wider, make it deeper, so that there's less time spent in activation and more time spent in a place of a nervous system that's not kind of freaked out. Now, you're going to do this, right? And you might even go up and you might even go down, and it's okay. It's not about these being bad. In some cases, like, you need them. People needed their flight response this week in Los Angeles. They needed it. That is a very healthy, very important response, right? Freeze can be a very important, very helpful response at times. Like any of the, we have them for a reason, right? But when you have complex PTSD, you're just basically always in those states, and you got one foot on the gas and you got one foot on the brake. And I would go zzz, and then I'd be like, boom, I would just crash. So, the practice of resource helped me to expand that window of tolerance, among many other things. But if I had to choose one practice to answer that question, it would be the practice of resource.
Wonderful. And I believe if it's not already up there, there will be one soon on your YouTube channel, a meditation for resource.
There's something on there, but there'll be something better.
Kirsten has asked, can you talk more about using pain in a new way? You were talking about it when you were talking about somatic.
Using pain in a new way. Kristen, are you here? I don't understand the question. I don't want to skip it. I just don't understand it. If you want,
noodle on it, Jess. We've got another question here. Okay. We can come back to Kristen's question. So Clinton has asked, when you are writing, how much do you let your editor self be involved?
Not at all. Yeah. Some of it's just happening automatically, but North Atlantic Books has good editors, so they help me quite a lot. My book got a number of editors supporting it, which was fantastic. But yeah, I really this is why I don't like writing like what was it? I was like hired, when I get hired to write like an article, I pretty much actually don't do it. Like I just say no because I'm just like I hate it. Like I hate being given a topic and being told you have to write it this way in this style for this. Like I wrote something for Greater Good, the Berkeley University, which is so funny because I didn't even go to high school, you know. So, but Berkeley, whatever it is, publication. And I remember writing that, and I was happy to have this, you know, job to write this article, but I had to write it in a certain way with a certain voice, and it was like misery. And I've had a number of other of those experiences because then the editor voice is like, da, 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 you got to write it this way. You got to write. But when I'm writing what I want to write, I just write. Like I will sit down and I'll just write 4,000 words and then I'll be like, okay. And I like the editing process though a lot too. I really, really enjoy it. Like when I'm working with an editor because I like getting the notes and then going back in, and I enjoy that. But yeah, I really, not even intentionally, but I just, for whatever reason, I think maybe because of all the stream of consciousness journaling I did my whole life, like I just don't, that part doesn't show up.
Kirsten has clarified, you use that quote when talking about somatic practice, that it helped use pain in a new way. I just wanted to know more about that.
I do have to say that I messed up from the smoke and my brain. I was already sick since July. So it might just be my brain fog because I still don't, Jess, do you understand the question? I don't think it's the questioning.
I have been looking at the chat, so I didn't clock the somatic practice, but I mean, does anything, when you hear the phrase using pain in a new way, does anything spark for you? Sorry, word choice.
Yeah, I don't know that it will answer the question, but I will say that pain was a very powerful part of my early meditation practice. So Shinzen Young, who I've worked extensively with over the years, around the time that I started working with him, he was still talking a lot about pain and about the purification of pain and really kind of encouraging it to a certain extent, which is fine. And I was down with that. Like I was really into it. And I had other male teachers, and I had a high tolerance for pain, and I had a high tolerance for punishment. And so it quantumized the hell out of that pain. I would sit for like hours and hours without moving. I would sit with my arms held out like this. I would sit on uncomfortable surfaces. I would like do whatever I could do to create more pain, which is ridiculous because I was already in pain, but I didn't quite recognize it. And through doing that, what would happen is the pain would be deconstructed to such a point where not only would it cease to be painful, but it would become pleasure. This is a very powerful thing if you are in some situation where you have no choice but to be in massive pain. But I will give a little warning, which is also in the book, which is that if you get to the point where you are quantumizing pain to that point, you may not know that your stomach is bleeding. And you may get rushed to the hospital because you're so good at being with pain. And that's also why I didn't manage my pain for years. And that potentially is part of why I had the bleeding stomach too, the stress of that. I didn't manage it with anything other than the equanimity that came through the practice, which again, I'm not complaining. This is a really cool thing. It's just, everything has side effects, including meditation. But learning to work with pain as simply a sensory experience, separating it out from the thoughts about the pain, separating it out from the emotional experience of the pain. This is a very important practice, very powerful, very liberating. And you just want to do it responsibly.
Thank you. Diane has a question. During the writing of this, did you experience any flare-ups due to revisiting these times in your life?
Hi, Diane. Diane's my sister. Hi, Sissy. Yeah, I sure did. I was constantly in pain while I was writing the book. I was I certainly missed a few deadlines because of the amount of pain I was in. Yeah, it was rough physically. Um, and the thing is that I wrote the book, and then we went back in, and we didn't exactly rewrite the book, but there was just sort of a reworking that happened. So I did it once and I was like, whew, okay. And then I did it again and I was like, oh God. And then I did the audiobook and I was like, oh. So yeah, it was pretty painful, I have to say. And of course used all the tools. Also, I use medicine now. You know, I've become a big fan of pharmaceuticals. So I used those as well. And lots of baths and heating pads, stuff like that. But yeah, it's going into this stuff, writing about the pain, but also writing about the traumatic experiences, which is ultimately where so much of the pain comes from. But I'm glad. I mean, my life changed for the better. Definitely changed for the better as a result of writing this book.
Amazing. Lauren has a question. First, Lauren says, I also have used writing as an outlet for healing since childhood. When I was young, journaling was safe, speaking was not. What practices would you suggest for feeling more confident in sharing sensitive stories and topics verbally?
Verbally, like, just to clarify, you're not talking about writing and putting the writing out in the world. You're talking about sharing it with, and just like speaking it out loud to other people. Okay.
Yes, speaking words.
Um, well, the first thing I would say is listen to your body, because there is such thing as too much, too fast, which is traumatizing in of itself. And so listen to your body. Is this something that I feel safe to share? Also, who am I sharing it with? Is this a person that can hold it? Is it an appropriate time? I think all of that matters, because the experience you have with sharing it will shape your beliefs about what it is to share your story, right? So I would say, I'm not saying get all in your head about like perfect time, perfect da 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 da, but it's more like being very honest with yourself and rooted in your truth of like what is actually safe, so that you can have a corrective experience. So it's not like when you were young and you couldn't speak. So that so I think maybe the top thing is just about choosing the right people to share it with. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that might be the number one thing. And then, little by little, right? I think maybe try a little bit. Titrate. It's a word we use in somatic experiencing. Just a little. Just add a little bit of the chemical to the other chemical and see what happens, rather than just like.
Wonderful, thank you. Danny has asked, curious about your writing process. Were the poems birthed around the prose, embedded after the fact, or did they inform the creation of the prose itself?
Damn it, Danny. I love you. Um, I don't know. I can't answer that question, honestly. I mean, listen, here's the process. The process is, when I met you, Danny, I was in a writing workshop with Jennifer Paslov. And I don't go to a lot of workshops. I've gone to a lot of workshops, but I don't go to a lot these days. And I just felt drawn to go. And I went, and she like gave you a prompt and you write a poem or write something and then you share it. And Danny shared some. Danny is an amazing writer. Get her book of Lost Things. Yeah, of Lost Things. It's just beautiful, beautiful poetry. Anyway, we wrote stuff, and I ended up reading something and getting a lot of like really supportive feedback. And Jennifer's kind of like that. She's very positive with folks about their writing. But I got inspired because I really hadn't been writing much. I wrote Good Sex, and then I wrote a little bit here or there, but mainly I hadn't written much because uh, there were some relationships that needed to either end or really radically change before I was ready to tell these stories. And so that had to happen first. And at this point, I was ready, but not totally ready. And so this workshop got me going. And then we did some sort of like a 30-day challenge, and you would write every day. And I just started writing again, and regularly. And so some of those, I think some of those poems are in this book, at least a few of them. And so I guess in a way, the poems inspired it because they inspired me to write. And then the essays, it was hard to write. It was a little challenging to write the proposal for this book because I was like, I don't totally know what every essay is gonna be, but here's a whole bunch of possibilities of what they could be. And then kind of leaned into what felt the most alive from there. Yeah, look, the truth is that like writing is hard, but this book wasn't that hard. It was hard emotionally and physically, but it wasn't hard to write because these are just all my stories, and then there was some research to do, and that was the part that was hard, finding the studies and doing the citations and stuff like that. That's not my favorite thing to do, but a lot of the book are just my stories. So yeah.
Wonderful. So we have time for about one more question. So apologies if I don't pronounce your name correctly, but Harprakash asks, when did you learn to lead with vulnerability in a healthy way, such as in your writing? Which I think is a great question to end on.
Thank you so much. And thanks for being here. You are one of the people who sat me down and said, listen, you need to get this writing in a book. You also wanted the photos that didn't that's not in this book, but you're one of the people that was talking to me a couple years before I wrote this and saying, hey, come on, get it in a book, start writing again. So thank you for that. I mean, look, probably a lot of trial and error. That's how. A lot of holding back and shutting down, feeling alone, and then oversharing and feeling exposed, sharing with the wrong people, realizing. And then every so often coming across a person, and several of you are here today, who I could sit down and feel seen by. And Haberkash, you're one of those. You're one of them. Feel seen by, and as uncomfortable as it was to let myself be myself, I was invited to do so by certain individuals that came into my life. I would say I'm very much still on that journey of vulnerability. I think people that maybe even people that know me, but certainly people that see me online, I think generally think of me as a vulnerable and honest person. And I'm not saying that I'm not, but I taught myself not to cry when I was 9, and didn't for years, except if I was drunk enough. So vulnerability, I mean, it's the note I would get every acting class. Be more vulnerable, more vulnerability. You're enough. Just be you, right? I don't get that note as much anymore. I haven't for a while, actually, a little while, but for years, that's been the note. So it's been something that I've worked really hard on. And I will say, and this is in the book, there's an essay about this in the book, but a couple years ago, I underwent a 6-week assessment and was diagnosed with autism. And it has really, really changed my life. because I've realized just how masked I've been. And it's a very strange process, especially being someone that's seen as vulnerable, being someone that's seen as honest and like very like, here I am, this is me. And I always have been. That's always been, I can't help but like speak up for things. You know, if you look at my social media, you know, I just can't help. I have to, like, I literally have to speak what I think is true. But when it comes to just like, just being with another human being, like one or two other humans, and just being like, and, you know, there's different kinds of intimacy, but let's just say with a peer, with a lover, with a friend, just being there, whew, scary. And all the ways that I learned to mask from such an early age because of my special interests in film, performing, psychology, spirituality, all of these things taught me to be like a version of something, like a person, like it was put together. Now I'm like meditation deconstructed so much, like deconstructed self. And now there's this new and then, you know, reconstructed, but now there's this new deconstruction of just like all the ways, like even just the way I'm speaking and moving my body. I got to this point with my masking where, and you'll see it if you go watch my old teaching videos, I am so poised and my voice is so perfect. And I wasn't necessarily trying to do that. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do it now, because I didn't even know I was doing it. I didn't know I was doing it when I sat and had tea with a friend. So that answer is ongoing to that question. And who the heck knows who I'm going to be in a year? I might be really annoying by then. I know I've annoyed a lot of people on the internet, like annoyed, horrified, repelled, but you know, that's going to keep happening. And that's part of the vulnerability, because I don't like it when people are upset with me. That's so scary. That was so scary for so long. If someone was mad at me, if someone was disappointed with me, if I did something that made someone unhappy, oh my goodness, it felt like I was going to die. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to die probably from this, and it's worth it, because I will die. Whether it's for real or in some, you know, spiritual sense, like if I'm not who I am. So.
All right, Jess, we had another question sneak in, just one more, maybe quick one, from Sharon that says, your stories are so personal and powerful. What are your hopes for this book and the impact it might have on readers?
Thank you, Sharon. Sharon is my very dear friend, also my neighbor, also my landlord. She's been like my LA family over these last 3.5 years. So thank you, Sharon. I hope that, look, if there's even like a half of, how am I put it? What am I trying to say? I still get messages about good sex. I just got one the other day from a stranger. Like, this changed my life. This saved, like, people say I wanted to die and I don't anymore. It's humbling and such a huge honor every single time that happens. If even half of the number of people that have reached out and said that the good sex helped them, reached out to say that this book helps them, then that will it'll be doing its job. If even a quarter, I mean, you know, that's what it's about. That's why I wrote it. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. But for the people that it speaks to, it's going to really speak to. And I know that from the like advanced reader reviews. Some people hate it, and then some people are like, literally one person was like, everyone in high school should read this book and we'd have a better world. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, I was just like, wow. Like, I don't know about that, but that's what I hope. I hope that it helps people find their way to resolution and healing, whatever that looks like for them. It definitely doesn't have to look like what it looks for me, but like, I hope that it introduces people to modalities that maybe they didn't know about. I hope that I mainly, it's like, I hope it helps people feel less alone. Cause I've honestly felt alone most of my life. And, you know, it's only been, you know, in recent years. I mean, there's been glimmers, you know, but really in recent years that I've really started to allow for connection on a deeper level that responds to that aloneness. And that feeling of aloneness is absolutely a symptom of the complex PTSD. And so I hope that people can read this and feel less alone.
That's so beautiful. Thank you, Jess, for your book, for your time, for sharing with us. Thank you, Dedeker, for joining us and leading such a thoughtful conversation. And thank you to everybody who joined tonight. Thank you for sharing this space. Jess, any closing words?
Yeah, just thanks, Dedeker. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jess. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone that came tonight. I deeply appreciate you being here. I know I think at least a few of you are in LA. Thank you for making it in the midst of all of that. And thanks to my family for being here, and clients that came and practitioners that came, and just thanks to everybody that was here. And yeah, I mean, what's going on in LA does impact the book. It does impact the release. You can help with that by pre-ordering and then writing. If you order from Amazon, though, by no means am I saying you should go get it from an independent bookstore. But if you order it from Amazon, or wherever you order it from, find somewhere to review it. The reviews really, really, really help with getting it out, and spread the word. You know, I think we shared some shareable images. We can make this a grassroots thing, and if this book speaks to you, please share it with others. And yeah, and thank you for being here, and I love you.
Is Jake nearby?
Oh yeah, he's been
There's
here the
been a
whole time.
request
I meant
to
to
see.
I meant
Is
for
she-
him to be.
Yay.
He's in the book several.
Yeah. He's one of the editors, actually.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful night. And please, please, please stay safe out there.